Today we're going to talk about sensory seekers. We're going to start out with seekers in a Winnie Dunn sensory profile kind of context and then expand to a few other kind of seekers. Let's get into it. Welcome to the MoveAbout Therapy Services YouTube channel. I'm Dave Jereb. I am the owner of MoveAbout Therapy Services and the author of the MoveAbout activity cards. Today we're going to talk about sensory seekers. Now this is the third in a series that's probably going to be about 4 or 5 parts. I started with 4, but it could go longer. The first two are really valuable to go back and see, particularly the first one on a typical nervous system or a typical day. Go back and check that out and then come and see this one. After that we did one on big low zones, low arousal guys, and now we're up to sensory seekers. In the first one, I did talk about typical nervous system, and I talked about the fact that we often talk about different zones that we can be in. With a alert program kind of frame of reference, we might talk about there's a high zone, there's a low zone, and there's a just right zone, or an optimal band of arousal. That's where we function best, where we're calm and grounded, but awake and alert, and able to engage with other people, able to engage in the work and activities we need to do. In the last video, we talked about guys with big low zones that ended up being Eeyores, and they just kind of plodded along and never got to crisp unless we supported them to get the sensory diet to wake their bodies up. Today I'm going to talk about sensory seekers. Now what I'm going to tell you is the first sensory seeker that we're going to look at, and this is a Winnie Dunn model kind of sensory seeker, has a really big low zone. So actually their zones look kind of like Eeyores. And you think, well, how's that possible? Eeyores plodding along and Tigger's bouncing off the walls. But what I want to tell you is this zone is not their activity level. This zone is how awake their brain is. So their brain is kind of sleepy, so they seek and seek and seek and seek and seek, trying to wake their brain and body up. So even though they have a similar zone to an Eeyore, where Eeyore kind of gives into it, sensory seekers fight that and actively fight that and try and wake their body up. So they're actually more adaptive, more able to respond, and if allowed to, they can often find the input their body needs to be awake and alert. Often though, the guys that we have overshoot that. Now, to be honest, I should have mentioned it last video, but the Eeyores are the ones I worry about because, you know, they don't fidget, they don't move, they just plod along, they never really impact other people, and they don't really get the support that Tiggers do because they don't bother other people. So keep an eye out for those Eeyores and let's help them to wake their bodies up so they can attend and engage with other people and their learning. But Tiggers do get help because sometimes when they're seeking, they interrupt the learning and the ideas and things that are happening for other people. So they fidget and they move and they're touching everything and things are in their mouth and they're rocking on their chairs and they're constantly on the go. That's our sensory seekers. So they're doing it though to wake their body up, to try and find that optimal band of arousal. Now often they will overshoot and then they can become too high. It's very easy to go from excited to agitated because when you've got fast heart rate and fast breath rate, that's really easy to switch. But so there's that group that are trying to wake their body up. Often what they need is for us to support them to wake their body up, but do it in an organized way. So they often have roughly the idea of what might help their body. They know movement might help, but what we know about movement is that linear and rhythmic tends to be organizing and centering, whereas irregular, crash and bump, all never the same, tends to be alerting. So they're trying to wake their body up. What we want to do is give them intensity, but help them get it in an organizing way. So I would say the key would be look at what their body's seeking and see if you can tweak that to be more organized, to have more purpose, to be able to have more rhythm, and maybe to keep it more linear or organizing and predictable for those guys. If it's around movement, we might be able to do things where we're setting them up for success, so they might be looking for it at the wrong time. So sensory diet is really good for setting you up for success, but also maintaining you through an activity. But some things aren't fitting for a particular activity. Jumps and crashes off a trampoline into a pillow is not really a good match during circle time, but that might be a good primer before circle time, and to be able to set the body to be awake and alert and calm and grounded, and then maybe we're using a fidget toy to maintain us through circle time. So that's a sensory seeker that has a big low zone. that's really what seeker means in the sensory profile. What I'm going to tell you, and we actually have another video on seeking that I go into a bit more detail about that. Really, kids are seeking to help their body feel just right, and it's not just about waking your body up. There are some kids that seek to try and calm their bodies down. So kids that over-respond to sound, kids that over-respond to touch, we often find that they might seek movement, they might seek heavy work, they might seek certain types of touch. Often kids are overreactive or over-responsive or sensitive to light touch and unexpected or uninvited touch, whereas when they're seeking touch on their terms, that feels good, or when they're seeking often deep pressure touch or deep input to the body as they throw their body around or give themselves heavy muscle work, that can be quite calming for them. So when you're looking at a seeker, think, are they trying to wake their body up or calm their body down? And then be able to find, same thing for them. We want to give it organizing input, often with rhythm, but also being able to find that it's predictable, linear movement, deep pressure touch tends to be really valuable for those guys as well. The third kind of guy that looks like a seeker that I talk about in another video is a guy that has poor action regulation. So that's less about trying to adjust their nervous system, and that's about really having a plan and being able to get their body to do that plan. Although I will say that characteristic often goes with these other two. And so same thing, we're going to give them organizing input, predictable input to be able to help that. So that's your Tigger. Last time we talked about Eeyore, this is your Tigger. The Winnie Done Tigger is trying to wake their body up. They have a similar profile to Eeyore, but then we also have our Tiggers that are trying to calm their body down, possibly because they're over-responding to some other senses. They're trying to find a way to feel grounded. All right, so that's the third one in our series. Next time we'll talk about sensory defensiveness. And so make sure that you leave some comments in the chat, have some discussion, and hit that red subscribe button so you don't miss out. See you next time.